I'm George Curtis. Welcome to It's Your Law. Each week it's my privilege to bring guests that give all of us a little insight on the law, how it's made, broken, enforced, supposed to work, doesn't work, and maybe can be fixed. Today's program, like the rest, is unplanned, uncensored, uncontrolled, and I make no predictions, except I've got a couple of real interesting guests. We've decided to talk a little bit about the evolution of the law practice, specifically in Oshkosh. I remember when I came here more than 50 years ago to replace Bill Crane, who'd become judge in one of the prominent old Oshkosh law firms that claimed it was over 100 years old. Nolan, Crane, Patry, Gary Yakes were some, Joe Bauer were some of the people here. And across the street there was at least an equally prominent, just as old law firm that may also have claimed to be the oldest one in the state, Dempsey, Magnuson, Williamson, and that group. They really performed probably 80% of the legal services in Oshkosh. There were a great rivalry, but yet socially they were friends. Of course, lawyers have strong personalities, and over the period of time there are lots of splits, breakups, and I know I left that firm, but they survived very well without me, and they're still in existence. Birmingham Ref in that group. The Dempsey firm has had some splits, and they've lost some of their top people, but over the period of time they're still a Dempsey firm. And I'm delighted to have somebody here that was a prominent part of the Dempsey firm, started his own firm, and now he's added new blood to his firm, and that will give you a little picture about the evolution of prominent lawyers serving the city of Oshkosh. Enough introduction. Here's my first guest, Jack Kelly.
George, glad to be here.
Well, it's always good to have you here. I don't have any idea what you're going to say, but that makes it all the more interesting. Tell us a little bit about how you ended up in Oshkosh, in the Dempsey firm, and then eventually starting your own firm.
Well, I'm a native of Oshkosh. I was gone for 10 years for schooling. I went to Wisconsin for college, Georgetown Law School for my law studies, and I went to Harvard Business School. And at the end of that 10-year period, I determined that I didn't want to live on the East Coast. I didn't want to live on the West Coast. I really wanted to come back to my own hometown, and so I did. Jim Williamson and Louis Magnuson hired me back in 1977, if you can imagine that much time has passed. And so I started to work for them then, and worked directly under Louis Magnuson and Jim Williamson, a couple of outstanding lawyers, fine men, brilliant legal minds, and they helped shape me to the lawyer I am today. They were very generous with the information that they imparted to me, the shortcuts they gave me, the lectures they gave me, just the all-around exposure to them. And I guess you could say that they were my mentors. And I was very deeply appreciative of that. Louis was a far different man from Jim, and Jim was a far different man from Louis. Louis, as you will recall, was a very sober-sided man, no nonsense. He didn't care much for what your opinion might be. He was all business and hit the ground running every single day, including Sundays. Jim was equally brilliant, a much more fun-loving guy, let's say, but a very, very good trial lawyer, and really as tough as they came. He was a professional athlete too, if you didn't know that.
Well, I played basketball with him, although he would deny it. We were wearing the same uniform, and Jim was one of the classiest people I ever tried cases against. A real gentleman, but boy, no slouch in the courtroom. Totally different style. Louis was well known throughout the state, but don't forget Joe Dempsey, one of the most unforgettable characters I have ever met.
Joe had died prior to my arrival, but I knew Joe Dempsey. I had met him on social occasions any number of times, and he was hilariously funny in a very dry, deadpan fashion. Stories about Joe are still circulating and still bring people to their knees when they hear them. He was a real true wit, and sometimes not a very kind wit. But a very smart man in his own right.
And there were other independent, smaller groups. I think that Henry Hughes was a legend here. What do you remember about him?
Henry Hughes was a friend of my father's. Henry, at a very young age, had gotten elected to the Supreme Court, was there for a while, determined apparently that he couldn't support his family, his young family, on the meager wages being paid in those days by the state Supreme Court. So he retired, didn't run for re-election when it came up, and came back to Oshkosh and established a very good plaintiff's practice and trial practice. Very witty guy, very impressive guy, tall and a large shock of hair and booming voice, and a real showman. And he actually taught me how to play the game of ship captain and crew, the bar dice. So,
another classic, John Moore.
Johnny Moore was a wonderful guy, homespun. His wife was my English teacher when I was in high school, Martha Moore. Very wonderful guy. And he was really quite good in the courtroom, too. If he feigned that he was hard of hearing so that he would get people to say favorable answers again and again. Pardon me, and so he was quite a character.
Well, he beat me badly in a case, and my client kept saying, "You're killing him, you're killing him." I said, "Oh no, you watch what the jury's doing. They're buying it," and they did.
John Moore and Louis Magnuson, by the way, were both district attorneys for Winnebago County prior to the World War II.
But the people were well served. When I came here, I was impressed with the quality of the bar, the professionalism, and the fact that this tradition wasn't really holding the public back. They were getting excellent service, and I was impressed, and I still am impressed. But like everything else, things change and develop over a period of time. We're going to take our first break and come back and let you tell us about some of the changes.
Glad to.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to It's Your Law. Jack Kelly and I are talking about the delivery of legal services in Oshkosh, how it's changed and how it's changing, and some of the personalities that have carried that banner. And he comes from one of the large firms in the Oshkosh area. I started with another, but through various splits, we have evolved and have different shops at this time and aren't with those original groups, but then neither are the people who were there when we got here. Tell us how your practice has developed.
I came here to practice essentially business law and tax law after I left Harvard Business School. But the needs of the Dempsey firm at that time were for people that could do insurance defense work. They were a big insurance defense shop in those days, which I ultimately kind of steered them away from because I didn't think it was the area that we should be in. And so I started trying these insurance cases, and I had some against you, which were some of the most delightful times that I had in the law. So, I started doing a lot of different things and became basically a general practitioner. And with the exception of criminal law, which I don't do anymore and haven't for a long time, I have a general practice, and it's the kind of practice that kind of keeps you up late at night wondering, did I cover this fully and thoroughly, and have I made sure that there's no changes in this area of the law? Specialization is really the key today, and you're seeing people who practice nothing but antitrust law, nothing but medical malpractice law, nothing but administrative law, nothing but tax law. In a small town, you have to be able to do everything and do it well, and so that's what we've done. And you mentioned earlier about how you felt the quality of law was good in Oshkosh. Many's the time that I can remember laughing with Louis Magnuson and Jim Williamson about these poor bastards from Milwaukee who had to drive back all the way to Milwaukee wondering what the hell happened to them in the courtroom. They'd lost, and now they had to explain it to some big Fortune 500 company why that happened. So that was always kind of gratifying. But as you know, there are different personalities in every law firm. It's hard for everybody with large egos and large intellects to get along all the time, and so people come and go. And about 8 years ago, I left that firm, not under completely happy circumstances, but established my office 2 flights above where I had been in the U.S. Bank building on the 5th floor now. And started that practice there. For many years, probably for 30 plus years, I have had the use of summer clerks, people that I would hire who were in their second year of law school, smart kids, hardworking people, paid them, they weren't interns, paid them. It was a chance for them to learn about the law, to learn about private practice and to see what we did. And I learned from them at the same time, but I also got a lot of good legal work out of them. A number of years ago, about 4 years ago now, Ben Brand came to work for me for a summer. He was from a local, well-respected, well-known Oshkosh family. You may recall Ron Rasmussen, who ran for sheriff here. That was
I do.
That was Ben's grandfather. But Ben came to work for me for a summer, and it was clear that he wanted to return to Oshkosh, and I thought, this could be great. And so he started to work for me, and he is now going to be taking over for me as I wind back my practice through the upcoming years. And so I've been kind of mentoring him in the last couple of years the way Louis and Jim did to me. I've taken him to basically every hearing, every trial, every motion, every deposition between Fond du Lac and Green Bay and Chilton and Wapaka. So he's gotten a good cross-section, met a bunch of the judges and met a bunch of the lawyers, and just kind of getting his feet wet in the law. So that's kind of the latest evolution in our practice. He's going to be the man from here on.
Well, I've done business with you ever since you came to town. Of course, you were a local, so you were in town a long time before I was, and you certainly have gained the respect of all of us in many areas. A lot of knowledge about real estate, the preservation of wealth. But what impacted me the most is when I came to town, I had tried a lot of condemnation cases. Cases where, as you know, the government has taken somebody's property and is a little forgetful about the value of that property, and so we have to go to court and have a jury
Remind them.
remind them. I thought I knew something about condemnation, but you really took me to school with the depth of your knowledge. And at that time, there was expansion with the airport, expansion with the Highway 41 going up. There was a lot of condemnation work, and I bet you handled it for a 100-mile stretch.
Did a lot of condemnation work, still have some. There's kind of a trend in the large firms now to find out where the projects are going to be located. The Department of Transportation identifies new projects. These lawyers then send out letters to these homeowners saying, you need a lawyer. You're not going to get treated fairly by the government. We can help. And I've never done that. And philosophically, I'm opposed to that. But I think a lot of that work is getting captured by some of these large firms. There's a large firm in Minneapolis, a couple of large firms in Milwaukee that do that. So the condemnation work that I get, I still get through word of mouth and through just the bad luck of clients of mine having their property taken.
Well, you put your finger on another major change. When I started law practice, if a firm put an ad in the paper saying they were closing for the funeral of a partner, they were reported to the Board of Professional Responsibility for advertising.
Sure.
That was the worst thing they could possibly do. And then, of course, there was a Supreme Court case probably a little more than 20 years ago that said, no, the First Amendment applies to lawyers too. Anybody could advertise. Well, after that, you were a trial lawyer if you could spell trial lawyer.
And we've seen those guys come and go, haven't we?
Exactly. But of course, it's all changed. Now you can't turn on the radio or the TV without seeing an ad every 10 minutes. And so many of these people are claiming to be something that they aren't. The First Amendment really allows that. And so the community has to be a lot more careful. At one time, they would hire Jack Kelly because Jack Kelly had represented their uncle and gotten a good result. Now they have these little machines in their hand, and that's how they pick their lawyers. And so that's provided some challenges to us, hasn't it?
It has. There's a wholesale advertising on TV, massive advertising budgets that are expended each year by some of these firms. My wife was in a car accident about 20 plus years ago, and she was inundated with letters from guys saying, hey, we can help you. And then they would start calling, and she'd have to explain to them, well, my husband's a lawyer and he's got this covered. So So they're very aggressive about it, and I don't approve of that, but we can't really stand in the way of it. I'm afraid it's a fact.
Well, of course, and we see the competition on radio, on television, other sources, the yellow pages where people are advertising that they're super trial lawyers, for example, and I've tried more cases on my birthday than most of these people who have a full-page ad. But anyway, that's not the purpose of our show today. We're going to take another break and get Ben Brand here because he is the new picture of the Kelly Brand Law Office, and it's a comer, isn't it?
It is. I think you like him.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to It's Your Law. We're talking about changes in the evolution of delivery of legal services everywhere, and it's happening right here in Oshkosh. And well, it should. The rest of the world is changing, and the delivering of professional services has to change as well. We're going to give you a picture of today and tomorrow, and we couldn't have come up with a better picture than a young man that I happen to know when he was 12-year-old Cub Scout. He was hardworking, clean-cut, fresh-faced at that time, and I recognize him. Ben Brand, welcome to the show.
Good morning, George. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm jealous of Jack Kelly. His system is worked again. This idea of checking people out when they're students and finally coming across and hiring somebody that he wanted, and I don't know how he could have done better. So that you've had the privilege of being trained by one of the masters, and of course my understanding is that Jack isn't retired. We don't want to start that rumor.
Not at all. He still reports to the office each and every day.
Well, not only that, he's there on payday.
Exactly.
And will be for some time.
Indeed.
But tell us a little bit about how you got in the law and how you're being trained by Jack and the future of Kelly Brand, the new law firm.
Well, I too was born and raised here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and I left briefly for schooling in Madison. I went to undergrad and law school there. And once I got my degrees, it was a no-brainer. I wanted to come back and return home and practice the law here. There's plenty of good law to be practiced, as you guys have mentioned. There's a long, rich history here in the city of Oshkosh of good legal practitioners providing service to the community, and I wanted to be a part of that legacy. And it worked out perfectly for me that I met Jack right at the right moment as a second-year law student. The two of us hit it off right away, and my experience with Jack has really been invaluable. As he mentioned, I've been able to shadow him each and every single day from courthouse to courthouse to courthouse, and to really see how the practice of law is done. That's one thing they don't teach you in law school, is the actual in the trenches practice of law. And I consider myself very lucky to have someone like Jack to mentor me through all of those different trials and tribulations.
And you're following in Jack's footstep, the recipe of being a hometown person, a hometown. I used to be able to say hometown boy, but that's sexist now. And I've got other ways of getting in trouble that are much more fun. But at any rate, coming home where you know people and the people know you and they know your family, very prominent family here in Oshkosh, and of course being trained by a master. And Jack has done something that most firms won't do. He has, without charging the client, had you shadow him. So you've seen and worked with the various kinds of work that he has done. He's loaned you to me and other lawyers in town so that some of the things you don't do in your firm you can touch on. And so that is a wonderful way to train a new professional. But of course the profession itself has changed. Boy, has it changed. And tell us how it's done today. I know you don't have a secretary coming in and crossing her legs and taking shorthand on a pad,
right,
like happened when I started. How is it being done now?
Well, it's changed drastically, I think, and I think that's one of the interesting things about the relationship between Jack and I is, I've brought some new ideas to the firm and the way that the law is practiced. And for instance, we do all of our word processing on a computer nowadays. There's no longer, dictation machines are falling by the wayside. Shorthand notes are falling by the wayside. One of the primary ways that the practice has changed, and I came to Oshkosh right on the cusp of that change, is the advent of electronic filing in court. Gone are the days where you'll march your 4 copies of your summons and complaint up to the courthouse to be file stamped. Everything's filed online, electronically, and really, quite honestly, you don't necessarily even have to go to the clerk of court's office anymore. They still have, function, but online.
There are changes in how you get clients too. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. Social media has become a new font of legal clientele. One of the things that we've worked on is bringing our website up to date and increasing our footprint on social media. Now clients are finding you by Googling you rather than by finding you in yellow pages. And so it's very important to keep up to date on that to ensure that the clients keep flowing in your direction.
Now, our background here is a whole lot of books that I paid for, and I have to admit, nobody's read them recently. Why is that?
Well, nowadays, all of legal research is being done online as well. There are some key databases out there where they have all of the cases cataloged, and so you no longer have to go through tomes and tomes of reporters and case books. If you know the correct keywords to search for, and you know what you're looking for, you can find that needle in a haystack much quicker, thereby saving the client money from a research standpoint.
And how people find and choose a lawyer has changed.
Absolutely. Again, online presence is major. People are looking, for you on their phones nowadays, and you've got to have a presence that's findable in Google searches and in all sorts of other electronic media.
Well, the whole world has rapidly changed in terms of technology, and it's no surprise that the law has changed as well. And some of us who are a little long in tooth find ourselves running awfully hard to catch up because we're turning people out of the law schools like you who were trained in this century's technology.
Yeah, I consider myself very fortunate. In law school, from day one, we were doing legal research online. Just as, when I was in grade school, I had a computer every single day that I used and I was well versed in. And so it's been second nature to me, but it's not necessarily second nature to the older generation. And so it's helpful that for a firm to have a younger lawyer who can be, the resident research guru and have that online know-how.
We have a minute left, and in that minute I want you to tell the people what they would expect if they continue to call Kelly and Brand.
Well, it's the same high standard of legal services that you've come to know for many, many years. As you guys mentioned earlier, there's a long legacy that Jack has had of practicing law at a very high level, and we like to think that we've only ratcheted that up another notch by adding me into the fold and by bringing some new and fresh ideas to the mix.
Jack's done well. Thank you very much for
Thank you,
being on the
George.
show. The
appreciate
public is well served when they call Kelly and Brand.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I started out practicing law in my hometown, Merrill. One of the fun observations I made is that the Merrill people, if they wanted a real expert lawyer, would drive to Wausau. Most of my clients came from Wausau. They had the idea they had to go out of town to get an expert too. It was amusing. The only beneficiaries were the gas companies. I noticed the same thing when I came to Oshkosh. A lot of people thought they had to go out of town to get a good lawyer when we had some of the best in the entire state here. We had Henry Hughes, for example, who went on to be on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Charlie Nolan, my first partner, was a candidate for the head of the entire state bar. We had excellent lawyers. People didn't have to go anywhere else to get an outstanding trial lawyer. They had Jim Williamson, and at one point I was mentioned in the same sentence with Jim. The same is true. Oshkosh has outstanding bar, quality people, ethical, professional, who keep up with the technology. When you need a legal service, think about it just as carefully as you would as when you need a medical service. The services are here, and it's less expensive and more efficient for you to use them right here. That's my opinion. I'm George Curtis.